How's it flying, guys? Lance Corporal Hawk 30 here, and welcome. Finally, I am back after almost... Actually, I think it has been a month. Just about. Or if not a month, then really close to it, since Hurricane Helene hit Georgia, and the Carolinas and Florida as well, so I'm not distracting them. But I'm in Georgia, so I'm talking about where I'm at. A lot of people... needless to say, a lot of people were heavily affected. It took almost 2 weeks before I got power back at this house. And then it wasn't until this past Wednesday before the support blocks were fixed. This house got shifted on its support blocks, and some of those support blocks were busted. So that had to be fixed before my fat self could be moved back in here and stay safely. And a bunch of other things happened, one of which was my dog accidentally being run over. She's alive. She is alive. But she is in a recovery stage, having to pick her up by her waist to help her. It was her pelvis that was busted. She's got fractures in that area, and one of her legs is kind of messed up. But she's doing okay with her recovery so far. But also, you could probably see something very, very different here. That's right. I got a green screen. So, now, this is going to be a very interesting way of doing reactions going forward. Now, since Fat Electrician typically is on this side of the screen whenever I'm in his videos, I figured, it'd probably be better if I'm on this side. So, I just did a flip. It's been nearly a month, no reactions, and I need to start. I need to start back at it now that I have some time. But this was the first video of his that I missed after the hurricane hit, and there's other things I need to catch up on as well. Not just Fat Electrician, but that's one of them. The most gangster general of the American Revolution, Daniel Morgan. That name sounds familiar. I can't place it off the top of my head. So, we're going to go ahead and get into this. As always, link to the original video will be in the description. Please make sure that you guys have seen it before you watch any reaction to it, including my own. So, with that out of the way, let us go ahead. And let me double check. Yeah. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and go.
Benjamin Martin, aka Mel Gibson's character in the movie The Patriot, is very, very loosely based on the culmination of about 5 different American Revolutionary fighters, like Andrew Pickens, Thomas Sumter, Elijah Clark, Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, and this man.
Okay, so it's a fictional character based loosely off of some real people. That's always interesting when you combine factors from reality into something fictional. Like, you distill that into something. It's kind of like, I've not sat down and watched this entire show, but I know Chernobyl, that female scientist lady, was supposed to be a representation of well over a dozen other scientists. Right, so, but that's a little bit different because that's supposed to be really historical. I don't know what the consensus is on having a portrayal done like that, where you condense a dozen people into, like, one person speaking out, but anyways, that's that. This is about an American legend.
Today we're talking about the most gangster general of the American Revolutionary War.
Hold on. Hold on. We can't be going with that quality now that I'm shrunk down in this corner. There we go. There we go. There's that crispness that goes along with my fuzzy-looking head.
War, the undignified guerrilla, Daniel Morgan. During the American Revolutionary War, General George Washington would take all of the riflemen that none of his other officers wanted, put them into one unit called the Provisional Rifle Corps, and put them under the command of Daniel Morgan, a man whose battle tactics George Washington described as undignified. They quickly adopted the name Morgan's Riflemen and became known for their guerrilla warfare tactics of hiding in trees, picking off high-ranking officers, and disrupting enemy supply lines. According to General Horatio Gates, Morgan's Rifles was the American Army Corps that the British military feared the most. They are the primary primary reason for the American victories at Saratoga and the Battle of Cowpens, probably the two most important battles of the Revolution, responsible for turning the entire tide of the war. And we're going to get into it right after a word from our sponsor.
Before his wife comes in, before his wife comes in being legendary, gotta say, that's a heck of a preamble to what we're going to be experiencing in the rest of this video. Like, wow. And kind of a callback, I don't know if he's going to reference it, but one of his first video I'd ever seen was about the officers. And that's one of the tactics that was really a big deal in the Revolution, was the officers being targeted more than anything else. So it was like very interesting. I wonder if he's going to bring
Delete me.
2, huh?
Yeah. How do they do it in the movies?
They don't. No, nobody does that in real life.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
We'll talk to Keanu Reeves.
That's a movie.
Yeah, but he does it in real life.
All right, just put him on the couch. Love you. This video is brought to you by Delete Me. Super straightforward business. You give them money, they turn around, and they make sure the data brokers on the internet are not selling your personal information. Simply put, pretty much any time you go on the internet,
I wish those data brokers
and you check that little box
have a Delete Me moment like
service. Those terms more than likely mean that they're collecting
annoying.
Personal data. They turn around and they sell that data to data brokers, and then the data brokers sell it to whoever. The good news is these data brokers are legally required to get rid of your information and stop selling it if you ask them to. The hard part is figuring out which data brokers have your info and then filling out all the paperwork to get them to stop selling it. And that's where Delete Me comes in. Once you're using their service, they go through, they check all the data brokers for your personal information, and if they have it, they go ahead and they fill out all the paperwork to have that information taken down automatically.
Always handy.
After that, they continue to keep checking and rechecking all these data brokers in case they somehow acquire your information again. And
so even though we've heard Delete Me quite a few times on the Fat Electrician's channel, it's still interesting to hear about it, and it's even more helpful to see the stats behind how they do their business. I still need to sign up.
Selling it again and make sure that doesn't happen. So if privacy sounds pretty cool to you, go ahead and check out Delete Me. I'll have a link to the discount code down below.
I'm tired of them scam callers.
All right, our story begins in 1736. We don't really know when he was born. We also don't really know where he was born. We know that he was born in either New Jersey or somewhere in Pennsylvania. We do know, however, that he's a big dude. He is described anywhere from being 6 foot to 6'4" and built like a brick shithouse by today's standards. And by 1740 standards, this dude's basically a giant. He doesn't really start popping up in historical records until he's 16 or 17 years old, and that actually happens in the Shenandoah Valley of Fredericks County, Virginia. Now, this is actually a bigger deal than a lot of people might realize, okay? Because at the age of 16 or 17, Morgan got in an argument with his father, ends up leaving home, going out on his own, which is fairly normal, but he went to Virginia, which in the 1730s, 40s, 50s, Virginia is still very much the wild frontier at this point. Now, that sounds a little bit strange to some people, because when you hear the wild frontier, most people instinctively think of westward expansion. They're thinking of like cowboys and Indians and pioneers and the Oregon Trail and the Gold Rush. Okay, westward expansion is not going to start till 1803.
Yeah, it was like, there's still plenty of areas in the established colonies that aren't fully explored yet at this point in time. How many swamplands, for example? Like, I'm sure the Okefenokee Swamp area, which is, I actually have some ancestors that used to own land in the Okefenokee Swamp, which is the biggest freshwater swamp in the United States. Yeah, then the government's like, you know what? The lumber's a really big industry right now. Why don't we take that Billy's Island off your hands? We'll pay you this much. And they're like, no, this is our land. Yeah, well, too bad. We want it, and now you're getting paid even less. But point is, a lot of areas like that big ass swamp, kind of not as anywhere near explored as certain other areas in the colonies at that point in time. So there's definitely more frontier land compared to 1850s to work with. You know, by that point, East Coast was fairly explored. Like 1850s was like, but he's saying like in the 1730s, 40s, and 50s. Yeah, there would still be frontier land locally that they're like, I don't think we've tried this place yet.
and that's going to go on for a century after that. This is the mid-1700s. Virginia and everything south of it is still very, very much the wild frontier. So for a 17-year-old to get in a fight with his old man and be like, oh yeah, screw you, Dad, I'm going to go live in the modern-day equivalent of the Thunderdome is pretty telling of Morgan's character and quite honestly foreshadowing for the rest of his life story. And just to be clear, when I say that he first starts showing up in the historical record around this point in his life, the historical record that I'm referring to is the general store credit line in Winchester, Virginia, where he pretty much exclusively bought alcohol and playing cards.
But wait, there's more.
We know about this man from his bar tab. Well, not bar tab technically, but his tab. We know about this man from his tab. Okay, what a way to start.
And the Frederick County Courthouse records where he was repeatedly sued for assault, basically for getting in bar fights and beating the shit out of people. Now again, that sounds pretty weird because usually you would get arrested for getting in a bar fight and beating the shit out of somebody, but remember, it's Virginia and it's the wild frontier, okay? They don't really have much law enforcement to speak of. Really, the only reason that there's court records is there's one day a month in colonial Virginia where they have the court day and they basically shut down the entire town. The whole town shows up to watch all of the legal proceedings for the entire month, and then whenever you have an issue with somebody, you just sue them in court. So yeah, it's pretty hard to get arrested on Wild Frontier. I mean, you basically got to murder somebody, and even then, it's like, I mean, was he asking for it? What happened? Well, first of all, Your Honor, this motherfucker was going 5 miles an hour below the speed limit in the left lane of the Oregon Trail, which is outrageous because everybody knows the left lane is for crime. Then we finally get into town. I'm late because he won't get his wagon out of my way. He comes up to a red light, and then he just sits there. There's no traffic. He's turning right and doesn't go right on a red. He sits there and he waits till a green, at which point I got out, I beat the shit out of him. I don't know what happened. He fell down, he turned blue, and now here we are. To which the judge is probably like, yeah, we're definitely better off without that guy. Innocent, free to go. There was no left lane in the Oregon Trail, and there was no stoplights in colonial Virginia in the 1700s. Yeah, it's a joke. Shut up.
Exactly. You're just being retards. It's like, oh, well, there's no, like, you know, certain things on the internet should not be taken seriously. You're allowed to make jokes still. Tard nuggets. It is what it is.
Anyways, in addition to drinking, gambling, and fighting all the time, he's also working extremely hard as a wagoner on the frontier. Like, he's literally being commissioned by other people to drive wagons through uncharted territory. It's a pretty dangerous job for a 17-year-old, and he does that for years until he saves up enough money to actually end up buying his own wagon and going into business for himself. So by the time that he's like 19 or 20, he owns his own wagon, and the British military is actually looking to hire civilians that have wagons and commission them to haul British supplies for the French and Indian War, and Daniel Morgan agrees to do it. During the French and Indian War, Morgan gets his first taste of battle. That's where he first gets to see how combat is done, and he's not watching conventional combat of the time where it's just one big rank and file of the military walking up to another one, pointing guns at each other and shooting. No, this is a lot of Native American combat where the Native Americans are using what we would define today as guerrilla tactics, where they're simply just fighting to win, not fighting to maintain their honor or whatever silly shit the British believe in. Now, despite the French and the
So they're basically like, don't flame me in the comments too much for this. They're just hiding in the bushes. White boy summer is officially over. Don't flame me for the accent. I can't come up with a better one off the top of my head. But they're like, what the hell? It's like, trespasser. Bah.
The Native Americans actually trying to kill him. The real problem Morgan runs into in the French and Indian War is the British themselves, the people that he's working for, the team that he is on, okay? Because he's technically like a civilian contractor in today's terms, the British military looks down on him. They treat all these guys like absolute dog shit. And one day, one of the British officers is kind of talking down to Daniel Morgan. He's talking smack, at which point Daniel Morgan, being the defiant rebel that he is, immediately talks smack back. And the British officer draws his saber and smacks Morgan across the face with the flat side of the sword, at which point Morgan gets off his wagon and knocks this British officer out. Now, this is a huge problem because while he's technically not part of the British military, as far as the British military is concerned, he's still subject to British military punishment, and Daniel Morgan is sentenced to 500 lashes, which essentially is a death sentence. They're just not coming out and saying it. They string him up and they lash him 500 times. According to legend and Daniel Morgan himself, he stayed conscious the entire time, counting the lashes along with the drummer boy as they whipped him. Not only did Daniel Morgan survive this death sentence, but he actually claimed for the rest of his life that the British only counted to 499 and that they still owed him one. So obviously Daniel Morgan doesn't really care much for the British anymore. Despite that, he does fight on behalf of the British one more time during the French and Indian War. There's this British officer George Washington who's going around Virginia gathering up a bunch of like rough, tough frontiersmen that are going to be formed into a militia group known as the Virginia Rangers. He's going to have them go and patrol and essentially use them to counter the French and Indians' guerrilla warfare tactics. During this time period, Daniel Morgan gets even more guerrilla warfare experience, and it all comes to a head when the French lay siege to Fort Edwards in what is now West Virginia. So Morgan and his guys get sent up there to help out. That's what they're doing. They're inside the fort, and then one day somebody's got to deliver a message to another part of the military, so Morgan and one other guy are going to ride out and do it. So they leave the fort. They're making their way there. They get ambushed by some Native Americans fighting on behalf of the French. The ambush is over pretty much as soon as it began. The Native Americans pop up and fire at the two riders. Morgan's other rider is killed immediately when he's struck with a musket ball. Morgan should be dead too because he also got hit, but the musket ball hit him directly in the neck and traveled behind his jawbone and out his mouth, blowing out most of his teeth on the left side and giving him a large gash that you can even see in most of his portrait paintings for the rest of his life. At this point, Morgan's jacked up. He has no idea what's going on. The world's spinning. The horse doesn't know what to do. It's just going in circles like this, trying to figure out what's going on. Morgan, after a couple of seconds, regains enough common sense to realize he doesn't know where he needs to be, but he knows he doesn't need to be here, so he spurs the horse, not caring what direction the horse goes. Luckily, the horse ends up taking him directly back to Fort Edwards. Morgan ends up surviving. Okay, just so we're all on the same page. He's like 26 years old. It's the 1750s. Daniel Morgan has essentially been sentenced to death by the British military and just shrugs it off. Okay, he then goes back into war, becomes a guerrilla fighter with a tomahawk and a musket, and then he ends up getting ambushed and gets shot in the head in the 1700s and survives. And then he just goes back to living on the frontier like nothing even happened. That's literally what he does. He goes back to Frederick County, Virginia, and just picks up right where he left off, drinking, gambling, and fighting people all the time. So Daniel Morgan's back in Frederick County, Kentucky. Really the only historical record we have of him at this point, again, is the court records and the general store records out of Winchester. Same thing. He's getting in bar fights. He's drinking. He's gambling. He's doing what he does. Okay. Now, despite what I said earlier about being very hard to get arrested in Virginia in the 1700s, he does manage to do it on several occasions. In 1760, he actually steals a horse and a cart, and being a horse thief back then is kind of a big deal. So he does get arrested. He gets that was a big deal. Horse. And then the very next year, in 1761, he gets arrested again because he burns down the tobacco shack of a man by the name of Jeremiah Wood. Now, I don't know the circumstances that led up to this happening, but it did happen, and Daniel Morgan proves to be the main character yet again because Daniel Morgan goes into court and pleads guilty. He walks in front of a judge and a jury, and he's like, yeah, I did that. And the judge and the jury are like, I don't believe you. You're innocent. And Morgan's just like, dope. All right. Then a couple years after that, in 1763, he apparently changes it up and starts looking for a wife because according to the Winchester General Store Ledger, there was approximately 3 women all using Daniel Morgan's credit line to...
So that's a thing I'm going to have to pause for on its own, but before this, like... Okay, roll for honesty. Task failed successfully?
Buy lingerie, chocolates, and other small items, and by the next year, 1764, that number had dwindled down to just one, a lady by the name of Abigail Curry, who would go on to become his wife, and they would have 2 daughters, Nancy and Betsy. Okay, now what's important to understand about his wife, Abigail, is that, socially speaking, she's way out of Daniel Morgan's league. She is the daughter of a pretty wealthy farmer in the area, and that's a big deal because like, how you get social status at this point in time is owning land, and her father owns a ton of it, whereas Daniel Morgan is just like the bad boy horse thief with the scar on his face and the scars all over his back, and he's just this huge monster of a man. But simply bagging and marrying the rich girl wasn't enough for Daniel Morgan. He wanted to start climbing that social ladder, and the only way he could do that was to become a landowner. The problem is, he made more money running his wagon than he ever would be able to as a farmer, but he ends up buying land anyways, just for the social aspect of getting to say that he's a landowner, so that he can start working his way up that social ladder, even if it ends up costing him money in the long run. And the reason I bring this up is because it's going to be important to understand that Daniel Morgan has this chip on his shoulder for the rest of his life, okay? He's not some wealthy aristocrat. He doesn't come from a good family. He's, socially speaking, at the bottom of the totem pole. It's going to be that rags to riches story, and it's going to be a chip on Morgan's shoulder for his entire life that he wants more and more status all the time. So that's what he works on for like the next 10 years of his life, getting more and more money, getting more and more land, becoming a bigger and bigger fixture in the community. So
that could have its drawbacks depending on how it affects him as a person.
that he gets that social respect. Then, by April 1775, the battles of Lexington and Concord, the shot heard around the world. America is now fighting a revolution against the British, and Daniel Morgan is all for it. Then, 2 months later, June 1775, the Continental Congress requests the formation of 10 rifle companies to go and help George Washington fight in Boston, and one of those rifle companies is to come from Frederick County, Virginia. So the Frederick County officials meet up. They're going to end up recruiting the 96 men that are going to comprise this rifle company, and then they have to decide who's going to be the officer to lead these men into battle. So Daniel Morgan volunteers, right? Why not? He already doesn't like the British. He wants to fight them anyways, and if he does it as an officer, it's going to raise his social status, so it's a win-win for Daniel Morgan. And the Frederick County officials are like, oh, Daniel Morgan, the 6'2" land-owning giant that's apparently unkillable, wants to lead our men into battle. Yeah. You can have the job. Okay, a little bit of important context. I need you to understand, these guys are basically like militia. Like, if you think of Revolutionary War militia, that's what these guys look like. Okay. They're running around. They're a bunch of rough, tough Virginia frontiersmen. They've got Kentucky rifles. They don't have muskets. They've got tomahawks because most of them are French and Indian war veterans. They've got knives for scalping the enemies. They're running around in hunting shirts, not army uniforms. However, they're technically not militia because they are authorized and sanctioned by the Continental Congress, and they're allegedly going to be paid by the Continental Congress as well. So while they are functionally militia, they're technically part of the Continental Army. And the reason I bring this up at all is because Daniel Morgan is getting a lot more notoriety as an officer of the Continental Army as opposed to a militia officer. Because of that, Daniel Morgan doesn't just want to do it, he's going to set a tone right out of the gate. There's 10 rifle companies getting sent up to Boston to help George Washington. He wants to be the first one there. So Daniel Morgan and his rifle company set out, and they travel 23 miles a day on average for 21 days straight, covering 484 miles to Boston, and they are the first ones there by over a week. Okay, if you've never been in the military or
I was about to say, that was a different time. They didn't have no trains or cars back then. That's either walking or taking a horse. And I don't think everybody had a horse, so most of them probably had to walk.
Marched or anything. Traveling 23 miles a day for 21 days straight is fucking crazy, okay? That's the equivalent of running a marathon and then some every single day, except you also have all of the stuff that you need to live on your back as well. You're carrying a gun, you have all your clothes, all your ammunition, food, the whole shebang, and you're carrying it the entire time. It's crazy.
Before we get to this clip, the closest I've ever come to something like that was in Boy Scouts. We just had to carry our packs whenever we went camping. That's it. We never being in the military, spoilers for those who didn't know, but not a veteran. Check the description if you want the story. Yeah, that's the closest I've ever been. And that's kind of, for a high school age student, that can be a little, something depending on how far out you're going camping. But to go that far, that many days, that consistently, and still come out ahead of everybody is damn.
Who's gonna carry the boats?
So is making it to Boston in 21 days and not losing a single man impressive? Absolutely. Does it make Daniel Morgan look good? Absolutely. Does it violate the cardinal rule in the military of never be the first one to do anything? Absolutely. So because Daniel Morgan's rifle company was the first one there, they get the unique privilege of being voluntold that they're going to get attached to this mission to go invade Canada. Actually, the second and third fastest rifle companies also got attached to this mission. But the point stands. Never make the podium, okay? Just aim for middle of the pack.
Yeah.
Okay, real quick.
Yeah. I've heard this story time and time again. Someone's like, I'm good at this, sir. Good. Go scrub my toes. Like, put that up.
Quick oversimplified explanation of this mission. George Washington has this new hotshot young officer that he regards as a strategic military genius, and his name is Benedict Arnold. And basically what Benedict Arnold has come up with is a plan of being like, hey, America's got 13 colonies. We've declared our independence from Great Britain. We're now fighting about it. Hear me out. Since we just got started with the fighting, what if we strike first? What if we go, we invade Canada, we take over Quebec, and we declare it the 14th colony of the United States of America? That way, the English, rather rather than trying to fight the 13 colonies, is immediately focused on fighting the 14th colony to reclaim what we most recently took, and then we can divert all of our resources there and duke it out away from home. In addition to that, it's also going to put the British in the new mindset of, oh shit, we're the ones playing defense. We're not playing offense. We need to defend all of our other areas touching the 13 colonies so they don't attack those as well.
It is
so
a trap,
honestly,
wasn't it?
it's a really good plan. And then reality sets in, and it is pretty much a shit show like the entire time. They set off with about 1,100 men. There's 3 Virginia rifle companies and then a bunch of other Continental Army companies together. And the Virginia rifle companies kind of are like, hey, we were more or less commissioned by Congress. We were raised to be here. We're separate from this chain of command under this Benedict Arnold guy. We don't really want to associate with him. We only want to take our orders from Daniel Morgan. At which point Daniel Morgan, always being starving for social status, is like, I mean, hey, the boys want to take orders from me, not you. To which Benedict Arnold, just trying to keep everybody together, is like, fuck, okay, fine, I don't care. Just take your 3 rifle companies. You spearhead. You can be our scouts. That's what you're good at anyways. But that's...
So before we get too far ahead regarding Benedict Arnold, yes, obviously he was a traitor. That's where the phrase referring to someone as a Benedict Arnold comes from, for those who might not know, and I don't know if he's going to touch up on that in this video, but Benedict Arnold was basically, I can't remember all of the details, a turncoat, essentially. Like, he basically betrayed the Continental Army in some way. I can't remember all the details, but I was in London for 3 days. We took a bus tour, and we were passing by a house, and they said, okay, do you see that house right there? The one with that? Yeah, that was Benedict Arnold's house when he fled America to seek asylum in London so that he didn't get killed in America. Like, oh, okay.
That's the least of their worries, because the entire journey into Canada is pretty much an unmitigated disaster. Almost the entire force ends up getting dysentery from drinking unpurified water. They end up losing most of their food and medical supplies crossing rivers, and by the time they make it there, they're literally starving. I'm not like they were low on food and they were rationing and they were really hungry. Like, no, there's multiple accounts of men boiling shoe leather and eating it, starving. By the time they reach Quebec, the army that had left of 1,100 people...
Dude, at that point, cut some bark off of a tree and just munch on that. That would be more sustaining than a shoe leather. Oh,
had dwindled down to 600 between illness, death, and dudes just straight up leaving and going home because this sucks. So the army's essentially cut in half already before the battle's even started, and the half that remains is pretty beat up, starving. Benedict Arnold realizes he's not going to be able to take the city of Quebec under these conditions, so he just sets up camp, writes some letters, tries to get some resupply, and tries to get more backup. Luckily enough, resupply does end up making it. He ends up getting all of his men fed, and then shortly after that, Major General Montgomery shows up with even more men on December 1st, 1775. So now they got more men, they got their guys fed, they go up to Quebec and they're like, hey, here's the deal, how about you surrender? To which the Canadians are like, nah. At that point, they cut off supply lines into the city, trying to starve it out, while they're also setting up a battle plan of how they're going to invade this city and attack. Now, at this point in time, Quebec is a walled city. They have barricades, so they're going to have to end up climbing or breaking through these barricades to get into the city and take it over. The battle strategy that they come up with is that Benedict Arnold's men are going to attack one barricade, and Major General Montgomery's men are going to attack another barricade, and they're going to meet in the middle and then take the remainder of the city. Okay, now fast forward the night of December 30th, 1775. It is the first snow of the year, and that is when the Americans decide to attack. Focusing in on Daniel Morgan and Benedict Arnold's men, the barricade that they are attacking, they have a bunch of ladders and they're going to scale over the top of it. So they go rushing in. Daniel Morgan and Benedict Arnold, both kind of known for being out in front of their guys. Benedict Arnold immediately takes a musket ball directly to the leg, drops him out of the fight completely. Now Daniel Morgan is running the show all by himself. So Daniel Morgan and his men go. They end up getting a ladder on top of this barricade. Daniel Morgan's the first guy up the ladder. Right as he reaches the top, the British fire muskets and the blast burns his face from the heat and knocks him off the ladder, falls down to the bottom flat on his back, immediately gets back up, and he is now the second man up the ladder after himself. And this time he goes, jumps over the barricade, falls the other direction, lands on top of a cannon on the ground floor, and messes up his back. He immediately pulls himself underneath the cannon as the British are trying to stab him with bayonets to give himself a few more seconds to recapture his composure and get some more Americans over the wall to start fighting. More men come rushing rushing in. They start fighting. There's only 30 British soldiers manning this barricade. They end up surrendering just a few minutes later. From there, all the Americans come rushing in. They're fighting in the city, house by house, building by building. They're literally doing CQB with Kentucky rifles and muskets. It's crazy. But things are going good for Daniel Morgan and his guys. They're taking everything over. Finally, they make it to the rendezvous point where they're supposed to meet up with Major General Montgomery.
Then what happens?
He's not there yet. But all the other officers on the mission, primarily the ones that were working under Benedict Arnold, are like, actually, I think that we should stay here and follow orders and, you know, do what we were told because, you know, I don't think we have enough guys to be able to secure all the prisoners that we've taken while also advancing on the city and blah, 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 blah. So Daniel Morgan's kind of outvoted and he doesn't want to, like, put this huge rift between the forces. So he's like, okay, fuck it, fine. I guess we'll sit here on our hands for a couple minutes, and a couple minutes turns into a couple hours, and then it turns into like half the day as they're just sitting here waiting for Major General Morgan and his guys to show up. What they don't know at the time is that Major General Morgan and his guys, when they launched their attack on their barricade, Major General Morgan was shot and killed on the spot, forcing them to pull back, at which point his second and third in command launched a second attack, and his second and third in command also died. And then the third and fourth in command are like, fuck this, we're going home. They're not coming at all.
Well, damn.
No, 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 no. Hell no.
So Morgan and his guys are just chilling in some buildings and houses trying to stay out of the storm. And then eventually they notice that, oh, hey, that barricade that we took over earlier is it's shut now. And there's guys with red coats at the top of it. Did we not leave guards on the entryway that we took over? No, we didn't? Fuck. Daniel Morgan is now beyond pissed. He knew he should have been sitting there waiting for backup to come, and he should have just kept pressing forward. He would have taken over the entire city by now, but he went against his instinct to listen to everybody else, and now it has shot them in the foot. He grabs his men, and they all go marching back to the original barricade. As they come marching up, a British naval officer walks out on top of the barricade. He opens the door, him and some guards come out, and this naval officer that allegedly has the name Anderson yells down to Morgan and his men, "Surrender your arms," to which Morgan immediately shoulders his Kentucky rifle and shoots that guy directly in the face. Immediately, the men come running up with the ladders. It is a full-scale assault on the barricade, now going the other way. They end up getting driven back, and then they try again. They get driven back again, at which point they retreat back into the city.
That's a way to do it.
CQB with rifles and muskets for hours, and then eventually they get completely surrounded, and they have nowhere to go. At this point, the American men start surrendering one by one, small batch by small batch, and Daniel Morgan remains as the sole American that is yet to surrender, and he refuses to do so. So they end up getting Daniel Morgan like separated from all the other Americans, and they have him surrounded, and they get him backed up to a wall. Just a bunch of British troops with muskets and bayonets all pointed at Daniel Morgan. Daniel Morgan's standing there with his saber, refusing to surrender. The British are like, "Put down your sword," and he's like, "Which one of you is gonna come take it from me?" And remember, Daniel Morgan's like a 6'2" giant with a sword, basically being like, who's man enough to come get it? And the British guys are like, I have no idea what to do. If we kill the commander of their current army, all hell's gonna break loose all over again. So they don't want to kill him, but also they don't want to go try to take the sword in person. So they're like, shit. And luckily, as fate would have it, I don't know if it's divine intervention, I don't know if it's just the main character plot line, I don't know if the British sent a guy to go grab him, but one way or another, a Catholic priest ends up showing up and witnessing this scene, at which point Daniel Morgan, upon seeing this priest, walks up to him with a sword and gives his sword to the priest and says, "I'll give it to you, but I'm not giving it to any of these scoundrels." And they take Daniel Morgan and the rest of his men into custody. Okay, and just so we're all clear, historically speaking, this is a complete and utter disaster. This is the Continental Army's first major defeat. 30 Americans have just been killed, and another 431 have been taken prisoner. From here, Daniel Morgan spends almost an entire year as a prisoner of war, and it's important to understand at this point in time that a lot of the British military officers and the United States Continental Army officers all know each other, because almost all of the United States Continental Army officers used to be British officers. So, like,
either were
a lot of
or
them
trained under.
They're well aware of who Daniel Morgan is. They know about Benedict Arnold, General George Washington. They all know each other. So they go up to Daniel Morgan and they're like, "Hey, hear me out. We'll give you a pardon, so you're innocent, and then we'll make you a colonel in the British military if you trade sides and come work with us because you're awesome." At this point, Daniel Morgan, remembering the 499 scars on his back, is like, nah, I'm good. Don't insult me again. And he just sits out the entire year as a POW until he gets traded back to the American forces in January of 1777. So Daniel Morgan gets traded back, and he, is waiting around for orders, trying to figure out what's going on. Apparently, George Washington had petitioned Congress to end up making Daniel Morgan a colonel, which is incredible news to him because he thought he was going to get like kicked out or thrown in jail or reprimanded because he surrendered. This was America's first surrender, and it was technically his fault under his command. He was not expecting good news when he got released back to the Americans.
Yeah, that's some very...
He ended up getting made a colonel.
Bizarre. That's some very bizarre turning of events. Very backwards logic, but we'll see how that goes.
So at this point, Daniel Morgan is pumped, right? He's going to get to go fight the British again. He's got a promotion. Everything's going great. George Washington says, hey, I stood up this new unit. It's called the Provisional Rifle Corps. You're going to be the commander of it. They're all carrying rifles. None of them are carrying muskets. Okay, and here's the important context of understanding this unit. This unit, to anybody other than Daniel Morgan, would be considered a punishment, and I'm not sure if George Washington meant it that way or not, but Daniel Morgan was happy about it either way. Now, the reason this unit was a punishment was because none of the other high-ranking officers liked having riflemen in their formations. They preferred all their soldiers to be carrying muskets.
Really?
Now, if you know anything about guns, that sounds completely counterintuitive because everybody knows that rifles are better than muskets because rifles have rifling, which causes the bullet to spin, making it go further and be more accurate.
Yeah, he's going to explain it.
With the benefit of hindsight, we understand what firearms are going to evolve into and what battle doctrine is going to evolve into. That hasn't really been designed or figured out yet, so the common battle doctrine of the day is to have your men march in a very tight formation, shoulder to shoulder, up to another group of guys standing shoulder to shoulder, kind of aim your musket in their general direction, pull the trigger, reload as fast as you can, and pull the trigger again until all the bad guys are gone. And if that's the type of warfare you're trying to conduct, the musket actually is kind of better because the rifle's a little bit more complicated. It takes longer to reload, so your formation is firing less ammunition, even though it is more accurate, but then your formation also isn't as tightly grouped because all the riflemen are trying to get some elbow room to actually take aim, so it's more of a scattered formation too. So a lot of the other more traditional military officers that are more well-versed in the conventional battle doctrine of the day absolutely hated riflemen. So for that reason, George Washington took almost all of them that he had, stuck them in one unit, and then gave them to Daniel Morgan. Upon assuming command of...
I would assume that back in that day, that kind of a unit would be better suited for probably ambush tactics, guerrilla tactics. That would be my first assumption, and maybe it's going to lead to that, and I'll just find it out in a minute.
The Provisional Rifle Corps, Daniel Morgan also gets orders directly from George Washington himself, and in those orders it says, and I quote, "The approach of the enemy in that quarter has made a further reinforcement necessary, and I know of no other corps so likely to check their progress in proportion to its number than that under your command. I have great dependence upon you." Okay, I'm going to say that again, but slower. Check their progress in proportion to your number, okay? That's George Washington fancy officer speak for, hey, Daniel Morgan, that undignified guerrilla warfare stuff that you do, go do more of it. Okay, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down,
I was about to say.
George Washington himself has just pulled the pin on the fuckery grenade that is Daniel Morgan and the Provisional Rifle Corps and thrown it at the British
what you
with
do,
no
sir.
orders other than go win.
If it works.
Daniel Morgan and the Provisional Rifle Corps go on a guerrilla warfare rampage, shutting down supply lines, picking off officers, doing absolutely everything they can to hamper the British war machine. Okay, and just so we're all on the same page, because I really need you to understand this, it's the big takeaway from the video, okay? In the pop culture zeitgeist about the American Revolutionary War, there's something called the American Rifleman myth, and that's basically the pop culture movie Hollywood understanding that America won the Revolutionary War because all of the Americans, the Continental military, the militias, absolutely everybody was a bunch of riflemen hiding in the tree line, picking off the British one at a time.
Not
That's
everyone.
Not necessarily true by any stretch of the imagination. The Continental military of the United States, in large, fought exactly like the British fought. They got in formations, they marched right up with muskets, stood there, and fired at each other. So the American rifleman myth, or the pop culture understanding of the Revolutionary War that everybody was a rifleman hiding in the tree line, is actually heavily influenced by the militias. You know, people like Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, doing what he was doing down in South Carolina, but more so it comes from Daniel Morgan and Morgan's rifles. Okay, and the key
that makes sense.
Difference here is that the militias are just that. They're militias. It's literally a bunch of dudes from one area that got together and are like, hey, I don't like these dudes in the red coats, let's go do something about it. And they're not expected to necessarily fight by the rules of warfare. They're just a bunch of civilians that took up arms and went to go fight.
I'm gonna kill me some redcoats. I believe you would.
In contrast to that, the Provisional Rifle Corps is part of the Continental Army. The men that comprise it are not a bunch of farmers that grabbed their musket from over the fireplace and went to war. No, these are professional soldiers that have been trained how to fight in warfare, and then they got grouped together and sent out to conduct asymmetrical warfare against the enemy. In a lot of ways, Morgan's Rifles are America's first Special Forces unit.
Spartans! What is your profession?
I mean, I was about to say, not that specifically, but that's... Special warfare units, you gotta start somewhere.
And because of this, Morgan's Rifles gains a lot of notoriety and honestly a lot of hatred from the British because it's a completely different tone, right? When the militia behaves this way, that's one thing. They're the irregular, non-professional fighting force that just took up arms. They're going to do whatever they're going to do.
I mean, like, you mean these are professionals doing this unsavory tactics? Oh, the nerve, the uncouthness, the ignobility. How dare they? That's not how they should conduct warfare. Yeah, joke's on them, they lost.
They don't really have any oversight, but when Morgan's Rifles, an official part of the Continental Army, the professional military, behaves this way, it sends the message to the British of like, hey, we're in this to win no matter what, we're gonna get it done. Okay, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, I'm trying to tell you that Daniel Morgan and the Provisional Rifle Corps are a huge part of the reason that America has the attitude towards warfare that it does. That if you're not cheating, you're not trying, and it's never a war crime the first time, especially if you win.
Saratoga.
The guerrilla warfare goes on for a couple of months.
I'm assuming that's a big deal, Saratoga.
The British have sent down an army under the command of General Burgoyne to go south and cut the American colonies essentially in half, which will divide the two, and they will divide and conquer, surely leading to a British victory. This absolutely cannot happen, so Horatio Gates and Daniel Morgan are going to go stop them at a place called Saratoga. And right out of the gate, Morgan and his riflemen go out and ensure that the Americans go stop them at
Okay, I wanted to get a quick look and kind of see what the layout is. Hudson's River, Tennessee. Okay, so this was in Tennessee. Hold on, what does it say in that top corner?
a place called Saratoga.
Plan of the position taken by General Burgoyne, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, on the 10th of October, 1777, in which the British Army was invested by the Americans under the command of General Gates and surrendered to him on the 16th of October the same year. Okay. Let's see here. So you got that big river. They had to cross it. Cross into the British Army units. Margin. Park artillery. Okay. There's the town. Okay, hopefully I kind of understand this.
And right out of the gate, Morgan and his riflemen go out and ensure that the Americans are winning before the battle even starts. They begin harassing the British, and on top of that, and more importantly, they end up taking out all the British scouts before they can report back on what the terrain of this battlefield even looks like. So when the battle does start, the Americans are going to have an understanding of the terrain, and the British are not, giving the Americans a huge advantage. Because of this, when the battle does finally kick off at a place called Freeman's Farm, the most forward British unit, being led by General Simon Fraser, directly tries to attack Morgan's riflemen. And it is, on paper, a British victory. Essentially what ends up happening is Morgan's riflemen manage to pick off almost all of the officers in his entire unit and like 75% of the artillerymen, and then they just run back into the woods and retreat. But the British did end up taking the land that Morgan's men were defending, so they won the battle. Then, like a week later at the next major engagement, Daniel Morgan sees General Simon Fraser riding into battle on his horse, orders one of his men to scale a tree and take out this general. He does. The shot lands. General Simon Fraser is killed. This is a humongous hit to the British military. According to myth, this shot was taken by the legendary American rifleman Timothy Murphy. However, a lot of historians have come out and said that they have no evidence to even believe that he was on this battlefield at all, let alone being the man that took the shot that killed General Fraser. However, we do know for sure that it was one of Daniel Morgan's men. While Morgan and his men are picking people off from the woodline, General Horatio Gates and Benedict Benedict Arnold take control of the conventional forces, lead them into battle, and start taking the fight to the British, and they actually start winning. And then at some point, Morgan's men get eyes on General Burgoyne, and they start trying to pick him off as well. So General Burgoyne is standing there watching his superior British military falter as he's taking gunfire directly. Morgan's men end up hitting his horse. They get a round that goes through his jacket, barely missing him, and then another round hits his hat, somehow missing him as well. At this point, General Burgoyne is like, fuck this, we gotta fall back. So the British fall back, they consolidate their position, they're trying to figure out what to do. General Burgoyne comes to the conclusion he's just gonna have to retreat from this battlefield. So he sends out scouts to start figuring out where the fuck all the Americans are, because remember, Morgan and his men were taking out all the scouts, so they don't know the battlefield, they don't know where the Americans are, they're trying to find a route to get out of this fight. And at the same time, Morgan and his riflemen sneak around the backside of the British, and they're able to pick off all of these scouts looking for an escape route, meaning that Burgoyne interprets this as he is completely surrounded and he is forced to surrender. Okay, this is arguably the most important victory in American history, because America winning at Saratoga is the first time that the Americans beat an actual British army in its entirety on the battlefield and forced them to surrender. This is the reason that the French felt compelled to back the United States as a whole and go against the British in the first place, agreeing to send reinforcements. If it wasn't for Saratoga, the French would have never have helped, and America would have never become its own country. And while not all of the credit for this victory goes to Daniel Morgan and his riflemen, a disproportionate amount of it does. And this is why the
So real quick, hold on.
commemorative painting of the Battle of Saratoga, the surrender of General Burgoyne, shows General Burgoyne surrendering to General Horatio Gates, with Daniel Morgan pretty much up front and center, being a giant compared to everybody else, dressed in all white.
Don't you know you're not supposed to wear white after Labor Day?
I was not expecting a 2005 Dukes of Hazzard reference. I was not expecting that. Sorry. Before this funny bit interrupted me, while I was letting that other bit played out, I was about to say, obviously we have the Battle of Saratoga to thank for the French ultimately deciding to back America. And it's a case of France is officially our longest lasting ally, right? And we make jokes at their expense all the time. I don't think they're going to ever live down the surrendering that occurred in the Second World War. They're not going to live down the shit show they left us in Vietnam. They're not going to live down a lot of things. But they threw down in the First World War, and prior to that, they were our longest lasting allies that we have ever had. And if not for the French of the late 1700s, of the 1770s and onward, we would not have become our own nation. So we do have a big debt owed to those French people. Not so much the ones of today, but the France of old, we owe a big debt to. I quit?
After the Battle
What?
of Saratoga, Morgan and his riflemen go back up north to help General George Washington.
He finally snapped.
Any major battles. Instead, George Washington just kind of lets them off the leash to go conduct and carry out guerrilla warfare against the British wherever they can. This takes place all throughout 1778, primarily around New Jersey. And while all that's going on, a couple of things happen that really piss off Daniel Morgan, primarily that he gets passed up for promotion on 2 separate occasions so that some other officer can become a general before him, even though those officers were far less qualified and had delivered far less results than Daniel Morgan. Couple of reasons Daniel Morgan got passed up for promotion. 1, he carries out undignified warfare. 2,
I'll let him finish this bit.
he doesn't come from a wealthy aristocratic family. He's literally a homeless kid from Virginia that has somehow become a colonel in the Continental Army. He should be happy where he's already at. They don't want to let him into the Generals Club.
What I was about to say was the chip on his shoulder that he mentioned earlier, the chip on Daniel Morgan's shoulder about always wanting to climb the social ladder. That's what this is about, isn't it? It's like, on the one hand, I get it. he's got a lot of victories under his belt, is very qualified so in that sense he should deserve it. On the other hand, where he's at now is in fact way higher than his station in life would have been prior. So, hold on.
And 3, Daniel Morgan does...
One of my buddies is calling. Let's see if we can get him on the phone. Hello? Hello?
Hello. Hello.
How you doing?
I'm at work.
And I'm recording a video.
Oh, no.
What's going on, buddy?
Not much. Are you recording right now? Do I need to call you later?
Yeah, can I actually call you back when I'm done?
No, I'm going to be going to bed here real soon.
Okay. Text me tomorrow sometime and we'll call then, okay?
Okay, well, you're
All right.
probably not going to get good reception from me out there, but I'll try.
Alright. Do you got anything to say to the people before you leave?
No.
Okay. I'm watching
Oh, no.
I'm watching a fat electrician video. You got anything relating to the American Revolution to make a joke about?
You sound like a fat electrician.
Not me! My buddy, everybody.
Oh, lordy. Lordy.
Alright.
Hey, man, I'll give you a call later, alright?
Alright, talk to you later, man.
Hey.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Leave it to my friend Brett to always come up with something. Oh, man.
doesn't really play the politics game, which is what you have to do to become a general at this point in time. Daniel Morgan thinks that his results should speak for themselves. Unfortunately, it just doesn't seem to work that way. And this is all very important to Daniel Morgan because remember, he's always got that chip on his shoulder about
like I was saying,
more status. He's that poor kid from West Virginia that wanted to be one of the elite. So when he keeps getting passed up for this promotion for people that are less qualified than him, it absolutely infuriates him to the point that he ends up quitting and resigning his post in the United States Continental Army. So that's what he does. He literally says, "Fuck you guys, I quit," and goes back home to Frederick County, Virginia to run his farm. And while he's there running his farm, they are begging him to come back on multiple occasions. Everybody's asking him. George Washington, Horatio Gates, they all want Daniel Morgan to come back. And the situation becomes so dire that General Horatio Gates actually rides out to basically beg Daniel Morgan to take his job back in person, right? Because if anybody knows how good Daniel Morgan actually is, it's General Horatio Gates, right? Because Horatio Gates at this point in time is praised as the genius of Saratoga that led the American Continental Army into battle and turned the tide of the entire war against the British. But in reality, Horatio Gates knows that Daniel Morgan is the motherfucker that's actually responsible for that, and they need him in the fight. To this, Daniel Morgan is like, yeah, I'll come back, sure, absolutely, but I'm only going to do it if you make me a general. To which Horatio Gates is like, Congress has to approve that. I don't know if I can get it done. I'll try for you, but I can't promise anything. To which Daniel Morgan is like, cool, okay, well, go try and let me know how that goes. I'll be waiting here. To which Horatio Gates is like, fuck, okay, just come back, and I guarantee you I will get Congress to push this through, and you will become a general. If so facto, Daniel Morgan gets promoted to brigadier general, and he is back in this fight. Daniel Morgan and his men get put under the command of my other favorite Revolutionary War general, George Washington's right-hand man, Nathaniel Greene, a.k.a. the Fighting Quaker. Now,
I've heard that name before.
Nathaniel Greene video, so we're just going to go ahead and say that Nathaniel Greene is a Quaker. Now, I don't want to turn this into a Nathaniel Greene video, so we're just going to...
Okay, so you say he wasn't going to turn this into... Will we get a Nathaniel Greene video in the future?
Go ahead and say that Nathaniel Greene is a truly exceptional general and also very, very important to the Revolutionary War. And one of the things that he understands is to let people do what they're good at. And that is why he gives Daniel Morgan the orders to take his men and become a flying army in South Carolina. His orders are essentially to never engage in pitched battle, run around in the backwoods of South Carolina, and fuck up the British's day.
Hit and run tactics. Gotcha.
And that's exactly what Daniel Morgan does. He gets to it immediately. It doesn't take long before the British...
Which is basically
out,
what they were
fuck,
doing before.
That Daniel Morgan guy's back, and he's ruining everything. So the British, realizing they have to do something to stop Daniel Morgan and his men, send in one of their best guys with his unit, Bannister Tarleton. This guy, in many ways, is the British equivalent of Daniel Morgan. He does not like pitched battle. He prefers guerrilla warfare tactics. The only real difference here is that Daniel Morgan is the poor kid that developed tactics and earned his way up the ladder, whereas Bannister Tarleton came from this wealthy aristocratic family, and daddy bought him his commission as an officer. So he doesn't really have the same amount of experience and ability, and he makes up for it by being overtly aggressive and extremely brutal. Just so we're on the same page, this is literally the guy that Malfoy's dad from the movie The Patriot is portraying in that movie. Prior to being sent to engage Daniel Morgan, Tarleton was engaging Francis Marion, aka the Swamp Fox, the other guy that inspired Mel Gibson's character in The Patriot. While engaging Francis Marion and Daniel Morgan in South Carolina, he was known to be unnecessarily harsh to civilians by confiscating livestock, forcing people to board his soldiers in their homes. In addition to that, he is also accused of slaughtering a bunch of Continental troops after they surrendered at what is known as the Beaufort Massacre. Now,
okay, so is this guy's tactic part of why we have the Third Amendment? The amendment that protects citizens from having any military personnel boarding at their house? Is that why we have... Is events like that why we have... Like, a-holes like that, why we have the Third Amendment? I would not be surprised if that were the case.
Now, that's the American perspective, but the British perspective was that Tarleton was an extremely effective officer, and the unit that he had under his command was referred to as the Legion. They were highly mobile, and they were regarded as one of the best units in the British military, especially in the South under the command of General Cornwallis. I mean, this is it. This is a headliner, right? This is shaping up to be the coolest battle of the American Revolution. In the red, white, and blue corner, we've got America's flying army under the command of Daniel Morgan, a literal giant that has defied death after being sentenced to 500 lashes, and defied death again after being shot in the face with a musket ball. The poor kid that came from nothing, that appears to be an unstoppable force on his way to the top. And then in the tea and crumpets corner, we have the British Legion being led into battle by Bannister Tarleton, known for his highly effective aggression and brutality. Two of the only and very best asymmetrical warfare units of their time, the special forces of their day, going head to head in South Carolina. And it all comes to a head January 17, 1781,
all right,
at the Battle of Cowpens.
Rope-a-dope, okay.
Cat and mouse with Tarleton for months, Daniel Morgan has decided he's going to throw his adversary a curveball. He is going to try to engage him in pitched battle, something neither of them are known for. For this battle, Daniel Morgan picks a location known as the Cowpens because it's like the inside of a cow's pen. It is a muddy, swampy, nasty fucking mess. And the reason this land is such a muddy, swampy mess is because it's situated right in between two rivers, a location that Daniel Morgan picked for the very specific reason of going against Tarleton. You see, about half of Daniel Morgan's force is comprised of militia. Militia is not good at pitched battle. They're known for firing one volley and then all running off and fleeing. They're not good at it. They're not reliable. They're not trained soldiers. And Daniel Morgan knows that. So by situating them in between two rivers, it's going to make retreating impossible, and it's going to force the militia to stand and fight. And Daniel Morgan knows that Tarleton is going to know exactly what Daniel Morgan is doing. So the way that Tarleton is going to receive this is going to be, Daniel Morgan honestly thinks in his arrogance that he can situate his militia between two rivers, forcing them to not retreat, and they're going to be able to stand up against me and the British Legion? Absolutely not. He is baiting Tarleton into fighting him head on. And Tarleton is obviously going to take the bait. So the night before the battle, Daniel Morgan decides he needs to let everybody in on this strategy that he's got cooked up, and he's got to hype up the men. He's got to get them ready and excited for battle. So Daniel Morgan, the at this point legendary military general known for his undignified guerrilla warfare tactics, is walking around the camp hyping up his men, shirtless, carrying a sword, showing off all the scars on his back, telling his men, we're fucking up the British tomorrow. Bear in mind, this dude is 6'2". He's essentially a giant among men, and he's walking around with all the scars proving that he's defied death multiple times, telling his guys we're gonna win.
And I will make sure that this never happens to anyone else again.
Okay, the men are...
He's talking about Daniel Morgan hyping his men up. Fat Electrician, Nick, you are hyping us up with this kind of build-up right here. We've only got 5 minutes left. How does this go? Like, is it a quick And done?
Pumped. They're being led into battle by Daniel Morgan. Andrew Pickens, the legendary militiaman, is leading the militia. And we've got George Washington's cousin here on horseback. There's no way we're going to lose. We've got way too many main characters. So the day of the battle, they're pumped. They're ready to go. They get into the formation exactly how Daniel Morgan told them to. And as Tarleton's forces come up, Tarleton realizes that Daniel Morgan, either in an incredible display of stupidity or arrogance, has stuck his militia in the center of his formation.
Unless I'm dreaming, I believe I see militia forming at their center.
No traditionally trained military officer would ever even remotely consider putting their militia in the center, because if they flee, the entire formation is going to collapse within itself, and that's it. Game over. That's why you put the militia out on the side, on one of the flanks, and then if one of your flanks disintegrates, I mean, it sucks, but it's not the end of the world. It's the difference between getting shot in the arm and getting shot directly in the chest. So Daniel Morgan has effectively done the exact opposite of what anybody would recommend he should do by having the militia in the center and the Continental forces on the flanks.
Yeah, art of war. Fight the enemy where they aren't. After all these years, it finally just clicked.
But that's not what it means.
Really?
And Tarleton, in his default hyper-aggressiveness, is going to show Daniel Morgan the fatal flaw that he had just committed as soon as this battle kicks off. Tarleton orders the Legion to attack the American formation head-on, attempting to scatter the militia at its center, collapsing the American formation, and taking the battlefield immediately. As the British Legion approaches the American formation head-on, the American militiamen fire a volley. The British continue to advance. The militiamen fire a second volley. It does not stop the British. They continue to advance. At which point, the militia members break ranks, they turn around, and they flee. Just like they were ordered to by Daniel Morgan last night. The militia members begin running up a small hill behind them, and as Tarleton sees that the American formation is collapsing in its center, just like he knew it would, he orders the British to bayonet charge and break ranks. The British Legionnaires chase them down at a dead sprint, trying to catch the Americans. They lose sight of the militiamen momentarily as they go down the backside of the hill, and as the Legionnaires reach the top of the hill, they have the biggest oh fuck moment in the American Revolution. What the now out of ranks, out of formation horde of British soldiers see is that the American militiamen are now reformed up with an additional 600 Continental soldiers formed up directly behind them in what is now a massive wall of musket fire, as the original flanks of the formation turn and box them in, and William Washington's dragoons pull up on the rear side of the battlefield, boxing them in entirely.
Did that go the way you thought it was going to go?
No.
Nope.
The Americans open fire with one humongous volley before launching a counter bayonet charge and crushing the British Legion in a matter of minutes.
Reverse card, bitch.
86% of the entire military force has been killed or captured. If the Battle of Saratoga wasn't the most pivotal moment in the
Okay, so the Patriot movie, I knew it had some moments based off of reality, but that final battle really was based off of that battle.
Revolutionary War, the Battle of Cowpens was. Daniel Morgan has effectively just hit the British Empire with the rope-a-dope. Bannister Tarleton did end up getting away, but with his legion effectively obliterated, the British military was essentially crippled and would never recover. After the Battle of Cowpens, General Nathaniel Greene would confront General Cornwallis, utilizing the exact same tactic that General Morgan had created, and it was effective yet again, forcing Cornwallis to fall back to Yorktown, where he would remain until the French showed up in Chesapeake Bay, laying siege to Yorktown, effectively ending the American Revolutionary War, with America the victor.
America! Fuck yeah!
America.
Daniel Morgan would return back home. His body,
I saw that, 1776.
effectively worn out. He would be riddled with chronic illness and chronic pain for the remainder of his life. To commemorate his victory at Cowpens and the pivotal role that he played in the American Revolution, in 1790, the United States Congress gifted Daniel Morgan a one-of-a-kind gold medal depicting his victory at Cowpens with the inscription, "Victory, the Defender of Liberty," on the back. This is worth noting, they obviously didn't have the Medal of Honor back then. I'm assuming that having Congress strike you a one-of-a-kind medal made out of gold is on par with the Medal of Honor, but
I would guess.
Sure. Then in 1794, Daniel Morgan would be brought back into service very briefly to lead troops to stop the Whiskey Rebellion. And then again in 1794, he would make one last contribution to the historical record, aka the Frederick County Court Files, when he was in trouble for breaking a man's jaw in a bar fight when he was 59 years old. He would then get to go back home, live out the rest of his life with his wife Abigail before passing away in 1802. And that is the story of America's most gangster general from the Revolutionary War, the undignified guerrilla, Daniel Morgan. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out. Undignified gorilla is 1,000% going on a shirt.
Yeah. Sounds like it'd make a good shirt. So, okay. Okay. That was a legit cool thing. That was legitimately an amazing story. I see Kip's reaction up over there. Peter Dinklage, why are you on my recommendeds? Yeah, it's like it's always fascinating to learn how many similarities there are between fiction and reality. So with The Patriot, obviously there were things that were going to be based upon reality, but it being a lot of fiction, which there was fiction in there, but there was surprise. After having seen this video to learn some of that history, it's surprising the amalgamation of actual history actually shown in the movie. Like with that final battle, just like, oh, there's a brick in my pants now. I'm going to run. It's stories like this that I think in American history classes we need to... I don't know how many of these details get taught in American history classes anymore, of individuals like this, and extensively, right? Because I know, like, in world history, there are things that just get glossed over entirely, or minimized in their importance. Excuse me. But Fat Electrician always does a great job in helping to understand, hey, this is what happened. And even taking those handful of moments to, like, call people out for being... It was like, hey, no, like, you're wrong on this, and stuff like that. I was like, oh, you're saying I'm wrong? Well, here's the things showing. Nah, I'm saying it right. I made sure. But anyway, I've got other videos to catch up on. And guys, let me know what you think of this new format with the green screen. Let me know if it's something that is going to work, or if you would rather I go back to my other style of having the video just be up in the corner instead, without me being superimposed over the video. Let me know if that's what you prefer, or if this green screen is something you kind of want to wait and see how it goes a little bit. Anyways, I am done with this reaction now, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. Like if you enjoyed, comment your favorite part of this reaction, and your thoughts on the Daniel Morgan story. Subscribe if you're new and tap the bell to get notified whenever I upload videos so you don't miss any reactions, gameplay, or otherwise from me. Also, go check out my Discord. Link is in the description. Come join, we will talk. Post memes, songs, videos, artwork. You could self-promote your own stuff and just have some fun. This has been Lance Corporal Hawk 30, signing off.